Hello, I'm Catherine Clark, and welcome to a special Remembrance Day edition of Beyond Politics. Over the past several weeks, I have had the privilege and the honor to interview 4 veterans who have served in either the Second World War, the Korean War, or in Afghanistan. And now it's a great pleasure to introduce you to the remarkable and delightful Margarita Madge Trull, who served as a decoder with the Wrens, based out of Great Britain, during the Second World War. Madge James Trull, it's a delight to welcome you to Beyond Politics. Thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, believe me.
How old were you when war broke out, when the Second World War broke out?
16, 17, in that area.
What do you remember about that time?
Oh, I remember a lot. Still in my memory, the bombings in London. I'm a Londoner from England, and the bombings were very bad, so you never get those out of your mind, you know.
How did it affect your, I guess, your young adulthood?
When you're young, it doesn't quite affect you as much. You know, you sort of go, you sort of bounce with it, but it does affect you.
You were going to go to a finishing school, is that right?
I would, yeah, in France. My father wanted to send me,
right,
which we did in England in those days, and the war came out, so that messed that up.
What did you do instead?
I went to a Barrett Street training school for cosmetics and all that. We actually made cosmetics as well. Cosmetic chemistry,
right,
and makeup.
So then how is it that you ended up joining what was known and still is known as the Wrens?
Yes, it's the Women's Royal Navy, WRNS, but the girls were called Wrens, WRENS. I said that because sometimes people wonder why the difference. I joined because I didn't want to be conscripted, and I joined just before conscription age, because if I was conscripted, this is terrible to say, but I didn't want to go in the land army to work in the fields and things. I wouldn't have been used to it. And I just sort of I wanted to be a nurse with my sister, so I joined up with her to be with her together. And she and I went to Portsmouth in England to join up, and decided we were going to go in the Wrens because the nursing was all filled up.
So you and your sister had gone with the intention of becoming nurses?
Yes.
And then that wasn't going to happen?
That wasn't going to happen. No, we'd heard that before, and then we went to Portsmouth to be interviewed with the Wrens.
Talk to me about that conversation between you and your sister when you were discussing what you might do.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a lot. You're asking a lot. That's a long time ago. Well, but I do seem to remember all those things pretty well. And I would say we both decided we'd go together. We were great friends, my sister and I. Her name was Jean James Winkler, and we were great friends and did everything together. And I'm afraid she's gone now, but we just discussed everything like good friends do, and we decided, why don't we go into the Navy, which is a senior service in England, and become Wrens.
My understanding is that when you joined the Wrens, you could really become anything. I mean, there were a whole bunch of various jobs that were done, anything from laundresses to stenographers to flying cargo planes even. How did you become what you became, basically a decoder? Oh,
yes. Well, we joined the Wrens. Then we were sent to Mill Hill, which is for pro-Wrens. They call it pro-Wren because you're not really in it yet. And you've got your uniform and everything, but because we volunteered, they could either kick you out or you could leave, which is not the way services work. But in this case, it could. So we went to Mill Hill and were there for about 3 weeks, scrubbing floors, cleaning ablutions, and you know what an ablution is, it's the toilets. And doing that sort of work, and they were testing us, I suppose, to see that we had the stamina to go through with it all.
How were you with those particular tasks?
No, I didn't like it, but I did it. Obviously didn't like it, but I was bound and bent when I go do something, I'm going to go through with it. So anyway, we were there for 3 weeks. Within that time, or near the end of it, each girl had the same job, would be interviewed by psychologists, a panel of psychologists who would ask you questions about your life and what you did, and did you have anybody else in the Navy and all this sort of stuff. And, of course, my grandfather was in the Navy, and one of my brothers was in the Merchant Navy. There were 4 of us in the services. My elder brother was in the Royal Air Force. My younger brother, who was older than me, was in the Merchant Navy. My sister and I were in the Rens. So we all wanted to do our bit.
So in those meetings that you had after your 3 weeks,
yes,
did they identify something in you that made...
Yes, they did.
They said you're not going to clean toilets anymore?
No, they didn't say that.
Oh.
They just said, we went in there individually, and they didn't say anything. They just like a psychologist would do, they'd ask all these questions. They want to find out, I suppose, if you've got the stamina, the endurance, and all those things to do this work. I know that now, but I didn't then. And so we went outside, we were all excited, and everybody had been interviewed, but only a handful really, was more than that, but a handful were picked for this job. And fortunately, both my sister and I were chosen, and one of our best friends in the Rens, she wasn't.
Oh, no.
Barbara Sumner, and she wasn't chosen, and you were separated now. So we felt quite sad about that, because you make fast friends in the services, and at least we all did. And so then later on, they called us, and they said, they woke us up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they said, you're to come with us, and you're to come with us. And we said, well, what are we coming for? You've been chosen for a certain job. So anyway, that's all.
And you had no idea what it was?
No, none at all. In fact...
Were you worried? Do you remember being worried?
Oh, yes, of course. I was very anxious because I thought, what is this? What are we going to get into? One always is interested in what one is chosen for or isn't. So anyway, they wouldn't say anything. They said, no, don't ask questions, you just have to wait. So we were ushered into, we got dressed at 3 o'clock in the morning, ushered into a paddy wagon, which is, as you know what a paddy wagon is, yes. And with no windows and seats all along the sides, and all blacked out, because everything was blacked out there anyway, and on for a ride. And we still didn't know, so yes, we were nervous. But we finally ended up what is now called Eastcote. It's a training center, and they then sat us down and told us what we were going to do, and that we would be trained as decoders breaking German messages. And we said, what's that? So they said, you'll soon find out. And of course, the next morning, we were allowed to sleep the rest of the night. And in the morning, we got up and hurriedly had breakfast and had to be taken into what they call bays, and were trained on these huge machines called bombs, B-O-M-B-E. And they were actually invented, I think, by Alan Turing. You've probably heard of him. And he was a marvelous mathematician in Bletchley Park. And of course, Eastcote was affiliated with Bletchley Park to be trained, and we were trained there for, I don't remember exact time.
Tell me a bit about Bletchley Park, too, so that people have some context.
All right. Bletchley Park was a big home. It's still there. It's a museum in England, in Buckinghamshire, And it's a beautiful big old home, very big, housed all these decoders, mathematicians, everybody within this work. Kept very secretive. I think they chose it as an old house, so the Germans wouldn't think it was an establishment of any other kind.
And what was it that you were doing in these bays where you were working?
We were actually decoding.
Okay.
When we would break it down on these machines with the drums on them, and they were quite intricate, which I can tell you about.
Yeah, describe them for me,
All
if
right.
you don't mind.
It was a big machine. It got pictures of it that say, I don't know how big, so many feet long and so many feet wide and so many feet square, you know, deep.
Yes.
And these machines had drums in front of them, and the drums would all be have tiny wires in them. And these tiny wires, there were millions of little wires, if they ever got crossed, you wouldn't get your messages. So you had to be very careful with tweezers to see that they were not crossed before you even started. We were handed menus, what they called. That the menu was to be decoded.
Yes.
And you had to feed that in and be sure that you got these drums exact as they were supposed to be. So that's another thing. You needed to be a perfectionist, which I am, I guess, and to be perfectly sure. And then the back was all wired up, like maybe a telephone operation type thing. But anyway, you had to be able to plug those in and know exactly what you were doing. If you did anything wrong, there's no way you could have broken these messages. So the machine would start, you'd set it and start it up, and then it would start to whiz around in all these drums all different ways. Really, I don't know why it wasn't hard on our nerves. It was. Many girls had nervous breakdowns from it because we were on shifts to do it. And we'd go from our quarters, we were on watches, and we'd go over to on this watch for 8 hours. I was telling Oscar that. For 8 hours, and the next shift would come on, and then you'd be on these shifts. So it never stopped.
You were on 8-hour shifts constantly?
Oh, yes. Well, we were on 8 hours, but then another shift would take over. You see, so you'd have your sleeping hours and a bit of entertainment hours, but not a lot. And I suppose, being young, we looked forward to those things. But then we'd go on watch, and we'd sit there for 8 hours breaking these codes for 8 hours.
Remarkable. It would have been exhausting.
It was tiring, very exhausting, because it isn't like in an office today you can get up and have a coffee. You couldn't then, but we smoked incessantly. We had our package of cigarettes, would actually light one cigarette onto another cigarette, and it kept us going.
I bet it did.
Oh, yeah, oh, sure. And that's why cigarettes are bad, because it gets your nervous system going, and it's not good for your system. Quit 40 years ago, believe me. Yeah.
How would the message come through that you were to decode?
The machine would stop.
Oh.
And you knew a message was broken, and we'd all get so excited because that could be Dieppe or whatever was going, you see.
Sure.
Yeah, because I was only at the end of the war that I joined, and I hadn't met my husband at that. No, I had met my husband, but we got married later because he went missing for 6 months.
Yeah.
He was in the RCAF, a flight lieutenant in the RCAF, and there's a big story about him.
I'd love to know more about your husband.
Oh, I love talking about him. Yeah.
How did you meet him?
Well, first of all, Bournemouth. I'm a Londoner, but my father had a home in Bournemouth as well. For like the cottages here, we would go down to the seashore, and it also became during the war a reception center for the Canadians, Americans, even the Russians, French, anybody that was in the war, allies, would go there. You see if they were in England at all, and New Zealanders. There were a bunch of everybody. It was a girls' paradise.
I bet.
Believe me. to go. Even though we were straight-laced, we were still loved to see those beautiful boys in uniform.
So how did you meet? Was it just that you were a dance?
Yes, we went to a pavilion, and this was before I joined the Wrens, and Jean and I belonged to the Red Cross, which we would then be chaperones, go to a dance to chaperone. But anyway, to the pavilion in Bournemouth.
Right.
It's a tea dance. And the boys used to go over there, I suppose, to meet the girls. I'm not sure. But
it's probably a safe bet.
And also, he was a wonderful dancer.
Oh,
so he liked to dance, and I liked to dance. So, funny enough, he and his friend, Jimmy McKelvey from Winnipeg, sat at a table next to Jean and I. We were waiting, actually, for a date to come in, but this date was, it went to Navy school. And very often they went to Navy school because they had to identify the ships so they wouldn't bomb other the English or Canadian or whatever ships, and knew the identification. So anyway, they were so late coming in that John and Jimmy asked Jean and I for a dance. So that's how I first met Johnny. And Johnny, could he ever dance a storm up? Beautiful. And the funny part is we had a Canadian band at the pavilion, and Ted Hockridge, if anybody remembers that, his name was Ted Hockridge, the band leader from Canada, and looked after the band there. And so anyway, here were John and I dancing around, and I was having so much fun with this Canadian that could dance so well. And he said, "Can I take you home?" And I said, "Well, really, I am with somebody else, but he isn't here. I had to buy my own tickets, and he was going to pay me back." So I said, "I don't think I have anything that I have to stick with him." "Yes, I'd love to go." It was very spontaneous. I swear that, I knew I liked him, but I was hesitant. I'm not a person to say I love you very quickly to gentlemen. Do you know what I mean? I like to be careful. So anyway, he walked me home, and Jimmy walked Jean. They broke up later. They didn't carry on. But Johnny walked me home, and it was probably a 3 or 4 mile walk home, because by then all the trams, which we had in Bournemouth, had stopped. Everything stopped at 10 o'clock because of we had double standard time then to make the day longer for the lighting, because everything was blackout after that, and therefore everything stopped. So
were you walking home in the pitch black together?
Yeah, in pitch. Well, yeah, we had torches, but we could know to keep, if we heard the planes coming, we'd put them off. So anyway, the enemy planes. So anyway, Johnny, we walked along, we talked about everything, and our religion and everything. How many, do you like children and all that? I thought, I wonder why he's talking. He was 6.5 years older than I, and so I wondered, why is he talking to me about all this sort of stuff? And I said to him, "Why are you asking me all these?" He said, "Because this first date." Because he said, "Are you engaged or going with anybody seriously?" I said, "I've been going with one Canadian for about a year, but, nothing's happened particularly." He said, "Well, don't get married or engaged or anything, because I may want to marry you myself someday." First date. This is without a word of a lie. And I thought, Canadian, that's why. The English are a little bit more restrained. But anyway, it certainly appealed to me. But then that was in the July. So we started to go out steadily together and found out that we really had a lot in common. And I wanted to know about his family and everything, because in December the 18th, we became engaged to be married.
How wonderful.
Yeah. And I got his ring on my finger, and at least he put it on, and we went dancing, and then, but in the meantime, I had joined the Rens with Jean, my sister, and I still could see him because we'd see each other on leaves. And then,
how often were your leaves?
Not too often, but he would be on leave, and then I could get a compassionate type of thing but anyway, well, actually, I shouldn't say that because we had what they called standoffs at the end of the month because the work was so hard on our nervous systems, and as I said, some of the girls did have nervous breakdowns, that we needed a relaxation, and it would be a long weekend. We could go home for a while there, but we had to be very careful not to say anything. We were sworn by the 90-year War Secrets Act, and you could either be shot
They
or
were serious about it, weren't they?
Oh, so serious that if you divulged anything, you could be shot or sent to Scotland to detention camps. It happened to one girl.
Did it?
She didn't get shot, but at least she was sent to a detention camp in Scotland because she spoke to, she was engaged to one of the chaps in Bletchley Park, and she talked about her work with him, thinking, oh, he knows all about it. He reported it.
Oh.
It was that serious. And so, of course, you obviously know that they didn't get married in the end.
Yeah.
And she was sent to a detention camp because of it.
Tell me the story about your wedding.
Oh, well, we got, as I said, engaged in December.
Right.
The 18th. And then in we thought we might get married in the March. But my mother was very ill. She was dying of cancer. And one of my sisters looked after her. And because you couldn't have maids or nurses or anybody much around if you had one family member. So anyway, he went missing on February the 20th, 1944, and was gone for 6 months. I didn't know if he was dead or alive.
What did they tell you? How did you find out that he...
One of his friends that was on the flight, Johnny Hodgson, phoned me up and said, Madge, you won't be able to see Johnny tonight on your date because he went missing this morning. We saw his plane go down. Apparently the fuel tank ran out, which is another story. I find there's a lot of sabotage in those days, you know, to the tanks. They put sand in and all sorts of things. So anyway, he had to come down in Belgium. And that's how I first knew. Then I knew officially later on because my mother died 2 weeks later, and when I went home for her funeral, I could tear up about this. There was a telegram saying that John had gone missing officially, you see, to let me know. And it was a pretty hard pill to take.
Did you think he was dead?
No, I'm an optimist. I'm optimistic nature. I believe God would look after him. And he did, because he came back in August, but I had no word of him at all. And I can remember D-Day, walking across from my quarters to the buildings where I was working, and it was a bright moonlight night, and thinking, that moon is shining on John as well as me. You know what I mean? So that's a contact. It's a young girl's dream. So anyway, no, I was optimistic, and I felt that he would come back, but I didn't really know whether he was dead or alive.
When did you see him?
I saw him 6 months later, and one day I was going on watch, and I had the officer called to say that I had a telephone call from headquarters in London. So I ran to the thing and I said yes, and the Air Force chap said, I have someone here that wishes to speak to you. Oh, I said, put him on. I didn't even ask who it was. I just had in my heart, knew that it was John, and it was John. And he said, Madge, I'm home, and I'll meet you in half an hour from London to your station. I said, I'll get time off for this, I know. And we hadn't quite time yet to go and watch later on. And so I got the girls to help me dress. I was so nervous I couldn't even, the collars were loose, you know, separate ties to the shirts. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't do it. My hands were so shaking. So anyway, I suddenly saw at the tube, as we call underground here, which was maybe a mile away, I saw this little figure, and it looked like a little boy, and I thought, well, that's not John, because he's not in uniform. But I still went on, thinking I was going to go, and this figure came towards me, became a little bit bigger, of course, as distance would do it, until finally we ran to each other, I knew it was him. He was all in his French garb. They had put on a little beret, what do you call them here now, a beret?
Well, beret, like a tam.
Yeah, tam. And he had hobnail boots and old clothes and everything that he'd traveled through Belgium and France with by the resistance. And it was the resistance that helped him through to escape.
You have an amazing story to tell, and you've lived an incredible life. And I wonder, just in closing, how your experience of the Second World War changed you as a person. You probably went into it as a young woman, a teenager.
Yes, yes.
How did it change you coming out of the war?
Well, of course, we lived in fear for 6 years. You can imagine that, because the planes were coming over every day, and they would bomb, and the next bomb could be yours. But you didn't live thinking that the next bomb. It's amazing how human beings can look above that and realize they think they're going to live forever. We all think we're going to live forever. But I think it did psychologically affect one. Maybe that's why I'm an optimist, because I lived through it. And I had a very good friend that was killed, and my father had a friend that was killed. I had boyfriends that were killed. You know, you lost a lot of loved people. And the thing is, you come out of it yourself, with your husband came out of it. I thank God. I really do. Because I believe very strongly that that helps. Anyway, I guess that's my psychology too today, is that I think maybe I put up with it, and what else can you do? Is really, what else can you do? When you're in a war, you're in a war. It's not very pleasant, to say the least.
Thank you. It's been such a delight to speak with you.
You're welcome.
I've really appreciated your time today and your service.